This is the calling to order with the ground rules.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. I'm looking for that.
I got it right here if you want me to read it.
Go ahead and read it then, because I'm on a.
Yep. The open meeting of the Men and Select, the open meeting of the Men and Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order on March 24th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. As such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in public accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is offered so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Men and Finance Committee is convening by Microsoft Teams as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join.
All right.
Officially called to order.
Yes.
Okay.
6:32.
So let's see, we got Jack. We got Norm. Mike.
I think Heather's in.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm here. I just keep my camera muted or not muted. You know what I'm saying.
Okay.
No, I'm gonna ask.
We've got some texting going on here, sending somebody a link so we can get everybody on.
Did you skim a little?
Yeah, I got that.
Whatever was in there.
News.
Oh.
Okay, well, the first issue are the meeting notes. I don't see those in my email. Did anybody else get the notes from the last couple of meetings that we need to approve?
The minutes, I sent them like early
Minutes.
this morning.
Well, that's what I don't see them in.
You know?
I don't see them in that email, but I'm looking in another place.
I didn't get them either.
Really?
No, I didn't get an email today.
All right, let me see if I can send them now. Well, without losing everything. Yep. Sent. I sent them from my work.
And I feel like we're on every meeting together.
You, huh?
Yeah.
Match file. Comments. Do this.
Were you able to send them or not? Well, you know what? We'll let's just move on to the to reviewing the ATM articles. Did you already take a roll call?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I'm on Gene now.
And I think everybody should be able to see a screen that's kind of split with the articles and then the spreadsheet, the STM spreadsheet. Is that correct? Can everybody see that?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so I'm gonna walk through these articles. I don't know if Kim, I don't think, Kim's not on.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Another way.
So I'm just going to start with the articles and just kind of walk through them, and we'll have some discussion about, a few specifically. So obviously, Article 1 is just talking about taking things not out of order and having to make sure that we have a balanced budget. Article 2 is the salaries, which really remain unchanged from previous years. Let me see if I can pull up the salaries from the Okay, so for Article, you can see this is for Article 2. Here are the salaries of all the elected officials. It's in the budget, but this would be what would be voting here. So you can see these are the FY21 salaries, including the hourly salary for the highway surveyor. So that's Article 2. Anybody have any questions on that?
There it is. Okay, so I just sent the minutes again.
Okay. We'll get to those at the end. Article 3.
So.
Is the budget, which we already reviewed. So what I really want to start to talk about is the current situation with Article 4, which is essentially the override. So some things have changed since the last time we spoke. Most importantly is the governor's budget. Kim, I don't know if you want to talk about it. Heather, I know you were on a call with the school committee, I believe on Monday night, right?
Yep, I was.
So I believe that the governor's budget directed all the cities and towns, all the school districts to cut 10%, assume a 10% cut in aid from the state. So, when they take, money from each of the towns, and then there's the state's contribution. So the state's going to reduce their share by 10%. And can you talk about some of the cuts that he has made in anticipation of that, Heather?
Yeah, so on the school committee meeting on Monday, they talked about the budget and some of the cuts. So because he has to give notice of the reduction in force prior to May 30th or prior to June 1st, he had to do it last Friday. So 28 positions have been cut. Some of those are retirements that are not going to be filled. Right now, it looks like about 25% of the special educators in the district have been cut because they're just relatively new to the teaching force in Mendon Upton. The English language arts teacher, the band teacher at the middle school, the chorus teacher at the middle school, multiple English, social studies, science teachers in the middle school at 7th and 8th grade, as well as many at the high school. They also had to let go the reading specialist at Clough, 2 ABA therapists who are primarily work with kids on the autism spectrum at in the autism programs at Memorial and Misco. I'm trying to remember. It's been a couple days, but they were some horrendous cuts. So part of it is about the override, but also it's primarily because of the governor's projected budget. And as we know, if the override doesn't pass in Mendon, then the agreed upon amount that Upton was going to give can't be given because of the proportional share between the two towns.
So the issue is, for the purposes of our meeting, the ask of $271,820, which is the current request that's being put forward, that's going to be voted on next week at the ballot, and then we'll be asked to vote on at the town meeting, is unchanged. The issue is that, like Heather just said, if it does not pass the 2.5 override, Upton has the money. The school could call a joint town meeting to fund it, just kind of rolling forward to next year. I don't see the possibility of 2 overrides 2 years in a row. So we may have to find a way to come up with this money. And in doing that, I did a little bit of checking. There's a couple of things. For those of you that follow the national news, this CARES bill that was passed by the Congress back a couple of months ago, the one that gave everybody unemployment benefits and the $1,200 per person checks and things, also put money in there to the states, and the state house, the Great and General Court passed a bill that directed us to keep track of money. There was about $550,000, I believe, earmarked for Mendon for COVID-related expenses. Kim, can you talk about how that's rolling out? Because I think that all plays into this. Are you muted, maybe?
Sorry. Hi. So, yeah, I was actually working on this most of today. It's due Friday. So the allocation that we've got is about $550,000, as Mike said. It's for expenses that are COVID related that weren't included in the FY20 budget. And basically anything incurred after March, and then projections about going forward for this fiscal year, and even potentially into the next fiscal year if you know that there's a cost. There's 2 different ways that we could go about it. One is to basically say, hey, send us the whole entire thing, and we will send you the invoices to justify. And if we don't spend it all, we'll give it back to you. We're not going to do that. Right now, we've compiled, I've had all the departments keeping track since the beginning of this. We are putting all the numbers together, and I'm going to submit on Friday. So, the school also has the ability to use some of this funding. So they can use it for cost related to providing remote learning things for the fall. And so my plan at this point, without having a finalized number just for the town, is to give them the remaining amount and then have them provide what they would like from that allocation tomorrow. I do think, if I had to guess off the top of my head, I think it's probably going to be about a 50-50 share. Right now, I think we're somewhere under 300,000 for our needs on the town side. So that means there'll be about, 2 and change for the school as well.
And the issue, though, is that this money can't be used to substitute for the 271.20, right?
No, and it also can't be used to offset revenue loss. So, if we weren't having a program that wasn't going to run, or we know that the state was cutting aid, that's not what it's for. It's COVID-related expenses that were unanticipated and not budgeted for in your budget.
So if the school had to change their operating procedures, for instance, smaller class size or something, and they had to buy the PPE for the students and the
Right.
kids. All of the expenses related to changes because of COVID and materials because of COVID could be used by that.
Potentially, yes. I believe the school has more access to different funding sources than we do at this point for COVID-related things because they're, you know, the demand for their service and the concern is a lot higher. So I'm not really sure if this is the only one. I know we have a lot of reimbursements that we can also do through FEMA for PPE. So it really, you know, I think it's going to be a combination of different funding sources for all the needs.
Okay.
So with the state budget cut, what is the dollar amount of that cut?
I don't
I don't have the answer to that.
Well, let me see if I can.
Might have it.
Yeah, I have to look and see if I have it in the presentation that he gave us. Let me go look in one place.
Yeah, I believe it was like 10% of their budget.
But it was 10% of what the state funds, so it was,
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know, it was well over $1 million.
Yep.
It was like 1.3 something. That's it might be a little bit different than that, but that's the number
Right.
that kind of.
Around that figure, yeah.
Mhm.
So, and the schools are not asking for us to increase the override to help make up that dollar.
No, they're not.
Not at this time, no.
Well, let me be clear before. I mean, we made it clear, and I don't have a hard copy of that document. I may have it in my laptop, but everyone that was at the presentation that the superintendent did at our meeting, I believe it was probably in March or April. He did a handout and a presentation, and in that he had a breakdown of how much the state was giving us. I don't have that number in front of me, but again, they said to cut 10%, and that's an estimate. And no, they have not asked us to make it up, which is of course why he's making all these cuts, because he knows that that's not part of the process. Although they have talked about potentially doing 1/12 budgets, so they've got to go along month by month by month of the year, as things change. Now, the other piece of information is I was actually able to get to place a call to our congressman, Jim McGovern, who is he's actually the head of the Rules Committee. And I did speak with him yesterday. And what he told me was that, there was a bill that they passed a couple weeks ago that's right now sitting in the Senate, which I don't recall what the name that they had for it. But there was, in that bill, there is $2.2 million earmarked for the town of Mendon, unrestricted funds that is given to us in anticipation of needed additional expenses and lost revenue because of COVID. Now, are we going to get 2.2 million? Well, if the Senate rubber stamps what the House passed, yes. But what Jim McGovern told me yesterday was that they initially said, no way the Senate wasn't going to take it up. And then yesterday he said that there were talk that they realize they have to do something, so they're going to take it up. The question is, will the cities and town aid piece of it survive or not? But if it does, that's potentially a place that we could help the school make up the difference or whatever other shortfalls are. But it's earmarked for 2.2 million for 2020. By then it goes by calendar year. So, into from now till December. And then there's another in that same bill, there's 1.1 million earmarked for the town of Mendon in 2021. So
Other sources of funding that the school may have available outside of these, what's the prognosis of that?
So
I mean,
so
you
the,
know, we could tap those.
so the issue is that, I mean, they were told initially to project roughly a 10% cut out of Chapter 70. Now, it may be more than 10% once the governor finalizes his budget, so it could be worse. Or it could be less. So I think the other funding sources, I mean, they do get regional transportation reimbursement, but part of the budget cut that he was able to do earlier, lowering the right amount from like over $1 million to 271,000 was out of transportation savings due to COVID, right? So there was some budget reduction based on, like, you know, they used less heat, less power, et cetera, less transportation. So I'm not sure actually, other than I'm sorry, I'm like out of town and been helping my dad pack, so I'm a little off. But I believe it's Chapter 70 and the town. I mean, there might be other like federal funding for special education, Title I, but I'm not sure.
I think that's what, but I think what Nick was asking was when Kim mentioned, you know, there are other sources that the school might have, you know, to make up.
Oh, got it. Okay. I'm not sure what those are at this point.
I don't either. And here's what I think is important is, if for some reason in this Article 4, which is what we're talking about, if the 271,820, you know, doesn't pass, and we're forced to come up with it, really the only source that we would have would be stabilization. And right now we have just under $1 million. So, you know, we'd have it, but, you know, and it's supposed to be a rainy day fund. But practically the only place that we could take the 271,820 from, if we were forced to give it, and it couldn't come from an override, would be, you know, either decimating the town side or taking it out of stabilization. So, does anybody have any other questions or comments about that? So that's what I wanted to get across to everybody. You know, at some point we're going to have to take a vote on all of this and take a vote on a recommendation, whether they're going to recommend the override or not. I don't think there's any benefit for us to take a vote yet. I think let's see how the ballot vote goes, you know, next week. And then, you know, I'm going to suggest that we have a meeting on the 17th of June, which is 2 weeks from tonight. And that's when we'll go through the warrant again and, you know, and vote on each article, whether we're going to recommend it or not. So if anybody doesn't have anything else, and again, you know, this is an open discussion, but if anybody doesn't have anything else about the override in Article 4, I'm going to go on, continue down the warrant.
Just a quick, I'm sorry to beat this into.
No, not at all.
I'm just curious, Heather or Mike, did you guys is there any, like, I wasn't able to attend the meeting yesterday, but was there any kind of documentation, or is there a write-up of exactly what the cuts are that you're proposing, or was it all verbal?
No, so he prepared a presentation. I don't have it, but because it was the school committee meeting live streamed on YouTube, but he listed the cuts. And I mean, and one of the things that I forgot to mention was there was an administrative cut for the technology integration specialist who works at central office, but it was basically across the 4 schools, pretty relatively evenly cut. And by and large, it was by seniority. So because many of the special educators were newer to the district, that's why they were cut. Now, he did talk about once they do get the final budget, if the override passes, plus the Upton money, bringing positions back. and that there would be some union bumping in terms of seniority to fill areas of need. So for example, he would have to bring back some special educators. Right now, there's one special educator at Clough after the cuts for a school of almost 400. So,
All right, I just tried to look on the Mendon Upton website, and there's nothing up there posted about the meeting 2 days ago.
Yeah, I kind of poked at that first, Mike. I was doing that at the same time and I couldn't find anything. That's why
Yeah,
I asked.
We were
Yeah.
thinking, well, when Heather and I were talking about this yesterday, we were thinking it was, and I checked yesterday and it wasn't, and I thought it might have been up there. And then I was going to give Joe Maruschak a call, and I tried 2 or 3 times. His cell was busy. I didn't even leave him a message because I'm sure that he's got more than a share of people calling him.
So Heather, I believe he said if the override passes, about a third of those positions would be reinstated. Is that?
so if the override passes, and then that would also include Upton's
Right.
proportional share, that would bring back 8 to 9
Yeah.
positions.
Right.
So I know another thing that he's doing, which they went into executive session, so they couldn't, it wasn't presented publicly, but I believe they are, the Board of Education and Dr. Maruschak are negotiating with the teachers union around, potentially, things that I think are on the table are things like no raises, no steps and lane changes, no cost of living increase, potentially furlough days. It could be retirement incentives. I don't know that because they went into executive session. Those are just things common that happen when you're doing salary negotiations when there's an issue, especially with the teachers union. So, because that's the biggest driver are the teachers' salaries.
Right.
So, it's possible if the governor's budget is better, plus the override passes, plus Upton's proportional share, plus maybe there's more retirements. It's possible they'll be able to bring back more, but they're not going to be able to bring back, I don't believe, all 28 people.
There was also increases to fees like athletic fees.
That's correct, yes.
Pretty dramatic.
Right. Include that. Yeah, $400 per family per sport. Which is at least over double what people were paying before.
Okay, why don't we, if you can take a look at this, back over to the warrant. Article 5, is $6,500 for the cyclical inspection program for the assessors. This is, a 3-year cycle. It's like it is every year. Same thing with Article 6. It's $17,000 for the valuation account, which is another issue in that same office. Article 7 is $2,500 that gets put into the police department for matching grants. And usually the money that's provided on this, mostly if it's on the federal level, they'll give money if we match it dollar for dollar, and that's what, or sometimes 50 cents on the dollar, and that's what that $2,500 is in there to do. Article 8's, not a money article; it's just the land use program. Article 9 is the Chapter 90 money, which the state appropriates every year, and we just have to accept it. Kim, do you know what that number is? I didn't have it. I didn't see it anywhere. And
I knew you were going to ask me that. I was just scrolling through my email to see if I had it, and I don't. It's usually around $260,000 to $280,000 a year.
Yeah, which is woefully short of the $8 million that report a couple years ago told us that we need to get all the roads caught up to where they're supposed to be. But just to give you the gravity of the situation. But anyways, it's money that they give us that we accept. And it's we're not spending any money, we're just accepting it. And by accepting it, we agreed to use it only for the things they want us to use it for. But I don't know what that number is yet, but that's Article 10 is $20,000 for the Affordable Housing Coordinator. And again, this is the money that part of his salary that we transfer every year for the same salary for the same person. It hasn't gone up. It hasn't changed. Article 11, again, this is CPC money. It's an additional debt payment for the police station. The number is pegged at 30,000. Kim, stop me if I'm off track or if I'm missing something. And then the Article 12 is actually again from community preservation money. Again, this is 133,855. That's the CPC's portion of the money. Article 13 is 95,400, which again is for the FINO debt exclusion. Again, these numbers are all pretty standard. 14 is just the article about the Water Enterprise Fund. And what I did was I took this screenshot out of an email that Dan Byer had provided that gives basically a breakdown of the town of Mendon's water enterprise budget. So you can see this for this article gives you what their numbers are, what their budget is. And again, all of this money, is comes from two sources. It comes from all of the ratepayers, all the people who get town water, and then there's a certain percentage that the town kicks in for the public water supplies, like the town library and the town hall, and for hydrant use and things like that. So again, we're not really appropriating money. We're just approving their enterprise budget, their water enterprise budget. So, last year we took it offline so that we're not paying it out of the budget, and the only people that are paying for it are the people who are using the water. Now, Article 15 is the revolving accounts that were set up every year. These have been unchanged largely. The one big change that there was last year had to do with the Parks Department. That's now set at limit on spending at $150,000. Now, Kim, I don't know if you can enlighten this. I don't think Dan's on the call. Dan Byer's on the call. But I know that, part of the reason we put these numbers here at this level was because of his need to pay for staff to do with the Kids and Company camp that they run up at the park. Do you know what the fate of that is and what the plans are to run it this year and then costs involved with it?
That's a complicated question. The state is still working through figuring out what phase and what regulations they're going to allow camps to operate. So to answer your question, yes, the reason why it's $150,000, which seems very high, is because it does cover the salaries for the summer programs, which, really, it's very specifically related to the running of that program. We did have a conversation about it, concept, last night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting. We don't know if the programs are going to run yet this summer. Really, there has to be a conversation about the cost versus the reward, basically, and the risk in this environment. Obviously, our primary focus isn't providing, parks recreation programming for the town. We have other services we have to provide. And this is a strange environment, but obviously we are looking for and preparing to be open in some capacity if we can be. So that's the extent of an update on parks.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, Articles 16 and 17 are planning board articles, they're not money articles. Article 18, again, $10,000 from community preservation monies to do drainage improvements and engineering costs at the town beach facility. Now, Kim, I don't know if you can answer this. We have had these kinds of conversations with Dan before, and in the past, and Mike Amandoli, I'm sure you remember this. We had drainage issues that it just never was getting fixed because they never really had a plan, and it never really got any more than somebody kind of poking around with a backhoe. And I'm assuming that we're not in this again. $10,000 is these drainage improvements. Do you know if there's a plan?
I think Dan came to one of the meetings already and spoke to this article right in the beginning, like, I don't know, a couple meetings ago. And I believe one of the reasons.
Not to the FinCom, but maybe to.
Oh, okay. So one of the reasons that because we were questioning about what articles and timing with this town meeting, part of the reason why this article is on here, I can't speak to the work itself, but the opportunity to get the work done within this time frame was important, basically to line up the persons or to get it done. And so that's why it had to be included on this warrant. I should add, in case I haven't mentioned, I can't remember which meeting is which anymore. The board did ask every person who had submitted articles to basically postpone anything that could be postponed until the fall that wasn't pressing. So that's why we have a shorter warrant for the annual. And we did have a lot of people postpone things until then, just to sort of focus on the most important things for this one.
Okay. So the short answer is that you don't know if there's a plan or not, but you're assuming there is. Okay. Well, I'm going to try to get an answer. Was somebody else? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's why engineering is part of the costs, because I think that they want to figure out the problem and fix it.
Okay. So you do know. So you did talk with him, and he does have this. This does include some engineering costs in it.
Yes.
And it hasn't been. Do you know what state the project is in? If there's hasn't been anything done yet because there's no money yet, right?
What is the project?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What is the project?
Dan would really have to explain it in detail. I'm not sure.
All right. What I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Dan to be on the call in 2 weeks, and I'll reach out to him and call him in the meantime. But I know I think Mike and I are going down the same road. We just want to make sure that it's that the engineering is done first, so that people don't go for the backhoe, and there has to be a plan. That's all I'm asking.
That's absolutely right, Mike, but if we're approving engineering, we should at least know what the project is.
Right. And again, all it says here is landscape and drainage improvements. And to his credit, a couple of times Dan Byer had offered to come to speak specifically about water issues, because he's their clerk, and also Parks Department work, including this article. But it just because of all the confusion earlier this spring, it didn't happen. So I'll reach out to him and make sure that next week he can at least bring us up to speed. And if he has any documents, I'll get him to send them to me in the meantime. So that's 18. I'm just making a note for myself. So Article 19 is $1,200 to put gutters on the historic records room building, which, for those of you that don't know, is that red brick building on Main Street between the World War II, between the service boulders for the wars and Founders Park up at North Ave, kind of halfway between when you're going towards Route 16 on the left. There's a little brick building, and this is $1,200 to pay for some gutters on the records room. 20 is $5,500. I'm reading this again. Do you want to just, Ann, explain that? This is money that wasn't expended, that's going back?
Exactly. So 20 and 21 are both just transfers back into the CPA account because the funds weren't used and they're done with the projects.
Okay. And then 22, the number I have in here is 10,000 for this native pollinator meadow, but is that number still the same or has it changed?
It's 20,000.
Okay. Can you just, I know we talked about it once, but can you just explain it to everybody?
Yes, it's on one of the open space areas off of Route 16, and you can see it when you're driving by. But it's not the upper field. It's a lower field that they don't hay, and it's sort of out of the way, but it's a really beautiful area. And there's a lot of invasive shrubs in there. And so part of this project would be to take those out, put trails in to get to the property, and plant native pollinator, shrubs and flowers. And it would be like an educational type of a garden. So there'd be trails and signage. It's near Clough School. And it's a many-year project, but there would be a boardwalk in part of it, and there's a lot of volunteers that are interested in working on the project.
Is that the field? It's right on Route 16, but I know there was one field that there used to be a house and there was still a well on it. The house obviously was torn down years ago.
Is that the same field, Lonnie? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it's the one that had the well on it. So
Yeah.
the well's kind of right on the tree line there. So it's that smaller field that's down in there, closer to the Muddy Brook area and all of the wooded area in there. Yep.
And it really would be taken over by invasive plants, and so it's kind of to save the field and restore it back into a native.
Is that in the conservation restricted area?
Excuse me?
Is that in the conservation restricted area?
It is, yes.
Okay, so Article 23.
Just another question on that. So I know a while back we were talking about selling some of that land. I assume that this is not part of that land that we were looking at selling?
Correct. This is all in a conservation restriction. It can't be sold. I mean, it could be sold, but you can't build on it.
Okay, thanks, Ann.
And with the conservation restriction, isn't it true the only way it could be, well, if it was sold, it could never be developed, but you can swap things in and out, right? On that plan?
Well, on that, I think that this property pretty much needs to stay conservation land, especially if you wanted to sell the upper portion and sell it at town meeting. I think you'd have a really tough sell if you were ever going to try to take away that strip of conservation land. And there's a lot of room behind it also, and there's just a lot of obstacles to take it out of the conservation. So I did look into it.
So the big point of it is that if we're going to spend $20,000 to get rid of invasive plants and put the native pollinators, it's not going to be sold or go away. I mean, the idea is it's going to stay. Right. It is that's the plan, right?
Yeah, and it's really a beautiful area. I mean, it should be a nice place to visit.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to have something like that right on the main road like that,
Yep.
But,
I would agree. When you do go down in there, it looks different from the road, but when you get down inside there, I've been down there quite a few times. It's pretty impressive in there, all the way down to the river, back up through. There's a couple of big pools in there, and then just the thick overgrowth of trees, but it's very deceiving from the road or even from the field. Once you get inside, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of large. I was surprised when I got in there. It's a big area.
Okay. Article 23. This is $10,000 for this initial phase of this public water supply. And this, if you remember, I think it was our last actually in-person meeting when we had Bill McHenry talk about putting a well in that potentially could be used for the senior center. And I think, and that is what this Article 23 is about, right?
It is. And he got a couple of grants. And so this is actually just to finish up work on one grant. And at the last town meeting, remember, we were trying to go through another property, and it was going to be like $140,000 to get access to this possible well site. And so this is another alternative that's a lot less money and less controversial because the neighbors didn't like the other idea.
Okay. All right. Article 24 was originally going to be to pay for a fire department pumper truck, but the decision was made to pass over it. Kim, can you just talk about that, why it's being passed over?
Sure. It was left on the warrant because we were in the running for a possible grant, and we still are, but the notification of that isn't going to come out until August. And so we wouldn't need the funding to supply our part until after then now. So we don't need to do it right here.
Okay. So that's why we're passing over it. Article 25, if you remember, we talked about the town well and fixing the well at the town hall because it's actually inside the building. And it's $50,000 that we propose is going to be taken out of CapEx to play for the replacement. Is there any more information about that, Kim? Any further?
No, we really won't know the cost until we actually hire the company to get in there and start doing the work. Obviously, if we don't need the money for the work, we can transfer it back into CapEx or some other place after we're done with the project.
So has anybody agreed to a contract with a set amount, or is it just kind of pay as you go?
No, there's an estimate for the amount of work that's done for a portion of it, and that estimate is somewhere in the $25,000 range. But then depending on what they find and what has to be replaced or repaired, there's an hourly amount that can be charged and some additional costs depending on the type of work that has to be brought in. So it's because it's such a strange situation, we really won't know until we get in there and start messing around with it. There is a real possibility that they can start to try to repair it and it gets worse, and then we're going to have to do something even more extreme. But Ann just spoke of looking for the other water source. We are actively looking at every opportunity we have when another project comes up to look at potentially other sites for water, because we don't know how long this well and this well feeds the entire campus. It's not just the town hall. So we really need to find a secondary location just in case.
What's the actual scope of work?
The plan, right, I can't speak to the details, but the idea is that they are going to come in, open it up, pull out the existing, they have to drill around, pull out the existing ton. I know Dan last time was saying it's whatever, the weight of the thing has to come out, and it's so strong. We have to replace the pump that's on the side of it, and is a possibility that it could break off into the well. Some of it could break off into the well during the time, but the hope is that they'll be able to move it up enough that they can replace this slim fit pump on the side, and that should be able to basically get us going again.
So this is this is Lonnie.
Oh, good.
Yeah, sorry. So you're talking about this would be, in lieu of drilling the well, would be to try to pull it up again to put a pump on the side and not a pump all the way down?
Right, exactly. To see if there's some sort of slim fit pump that can be put onto it that can potentially fix the problem for us.
Okay.
They explained they were going to use, at one point, somebody was talking about using a crane to pull it out, but the problem is in the basement of the town hall. So it's not outside, it's actually inside the building. And I don't know if it's because when they built the elevator, they built it on top of it, because I remember there used to be a well cover outside, but now it's the latest.
Actually, it's not in the basement. It's built, the addition for the town hall where my office is actually directly over the well.
Correct. Yeah, that whole, before there was, when the elevator and all of that was added on, the well used to be right there. And rather than dealing with it, then they built the addition over on top of it. And now it's just a real problem to actually get at the well. They can't get in there the way they normally would because they have a derrick or something over it and pull it out. And now they can't. So that is those are the 25 articles and the money ones. We just went through it. We'll have a meeting in 2 weeks to go back through that and actually vote to make a recommendation. The only other issue I have are the meeting minutes.
Did you get them?
I'm checking right now, Gene.
No.
Okay, I don't have them, Gene. So at this point, let's just plan to do it in 2 weeks.
Okay.
All right.
Lonnie,
So,
I
Mike,
might
I
need
just had
your
a quick
help
question.
again on that.
I'll catch up with you, Gene.
right.
Hey,
Okay.
Mike, I just had a quick question.
yes, sir.
Last time we met, there was some discussion around finishing up the police station, some additional expense around kind of COVID-related construction, and there was some talk of like who's going to cover the cost. I'm just curious if anyone has an update as to. I see that we got a lot of progress happening, at least from the outside as I drive by. Just any update to the status of that and any additional expense that might be.
I know that I did speak with the chief yesterday. He was in a meeting earlier yesterday with the construction people, and he said it's going along, and he's pledged to me that they were going to finish it with what they had, and that there are some issues with dispatch and regional dispatch, some really sounded to me like good news, funding news about costs, and there were money that the state was still going to give us, even though if we do this, we won't need it all. I know there is still a question. I believe there's still a question about taking down the old police station and then paving the whole area. And what the chief said to me was that based on this new wrinkle of this new dispatch, based on the timing of it, the old station has to stay up until they can switch everything over. So regardless of when things are done, I guess the current station is going to be still dispatch, at least equipment wise, up until the end of this year. That's about as much of the conversation as I had with him. So I don't have any other firm numbers or any discussion, except he did tell me that he realizes that, there is no more money. But maybe Kim or Lonnie can shed some more light on it beyond what I just said.
All right, about dispatch or about the police station?
Yeah, anything financial to do with the station and dispatch.
Okay. So dispatch is a separate issue, but that is true about the building. I can tell you that I started my morning today at 8 on a board of directors call for a regional dispatch center that we are currently talking to about the potential of maybe joining with them, and that's a topic that's going to come up. But we're not really further along in the process besides just having initial conversations of what a regional dispatch would look like. Okay. So we don't know for sure what the savings would be or really any of the details yet. We can assume there would be some if, you know, obviously in order to make a move like that, it has to be worthwhile for the town on a bunch of different levels. And so hopefully we'll get there. I know Mike is on the police station building committee, and he might be able to speak to what's going on. I know that the phasing actually changed right around the time where we were going back and forth up to, I think, Nick's question about who was going to pay for what related to COVID. Right in that window of time where we were debating the cost to continue, the restrictions got lifted, and so we're able to actually go back to work for a certain capacity of what was happening. So we avoided some of the drama that was happening then. But Mike may be able to speak to more detail than I can.
There's not much more than that. You've covered it pretty well. It's up to the state. The state's going to eventually make a ruling on for contractors and municipalities on this issue of trying to recoup money for the delays that this COVID-19 has caused everyone throughout the Commonwealth. But it's still up in the air. And like the chief said, we don't think it's going to be resolved till next year.
Thanks for the update.
I actually do have one more finance thing that is related to the police station, which is we are going to be going out to bond essentially the remaining $1.4 million that was approved in the next couple of weeks. Just in case you are curious, I have included the money for the payments for that bond payment in the FY21 budget. So we are scheduled to pay it. I have budgeted $140,000, I believe, $121.40. We can't be certain, depending on the interest rates and the term, exactly what the payment's going to be, but just be assured that it's in there. Okay.
Okay, but again, these are all monies that were previously approved.
Can you remind me, what was the total cost of the police station?
$6.4 million.
And what was the overage? Was it the 1.4 that you just said?
Yes.
All right, any other questions?
And I would say it weren't necessarily overages. They were, some of the items were overages, but some of it were we bid as ad alternates separately because the cost by the time it came in was substantially higher than we had anticipated when we began the process. And so collectively the town decided, I don't know, town meeting ago, 2 town meetings ago, to fund those ad alts in addition to the overage costs that were because of timing.
All right, if there's nothing else, I'm going to, again, our next meeting is scheduled for 2 weeks, which would be
17th.
June 17th at 6:30. And I just need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Okay.
No.
7:35.
Second.
All right, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?